to Bloody Good Horror.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of Bloody Good Horror. My name's Eric, and I'll be your host for this evening, where we will be, get this, people, counting down the top 25 films of the decade. You might be saying to yourself, but the decade isn't over, Eric. To which I would respond, I don't care. We're doing it anyway.
It is now.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
do what we want.
Yes, that's my second response, Casey. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'll be your host. No, I'm just saying that's exactly the other thing I was going to say. I will be your host for this evening. Joining me tonight, first up, Joe. I'm not sure how often you get your hair cut, but I feel like it's been a week, so I just wanted to get a status report.
It's the same haircut I had last week, but I knew it was a big show tonight, so I shaved. I put effort into the coif.
I noticed you have a button
I
up
knew
on,
we were
too.
posting this out not just for our patrons, I guess we're calling them now. So I wanted everybody to really get the full show.
Yes, Joe. The word patrons, it's new. No one's used it before.
Well, the site is not called patron.com, it's Patreon. So they're Patreons.
Sure.
But I can't get into that.
Joe, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm wearing one of these luxurious soft black t-shirts that I turned you on to today.
Mine will be arriving in the next couple of days. I'm
Beautiful.
very excited about this potential like $5 game changer t-shirt.
Yeah, man. There you go. Anyway, I skipped this part. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Next up from Indiana, please welcome Casey.
Hello.
And Cece is going to join us in a little bit. Don't you worry. She'll be here to talk shit to Joe. But that's not happening right now. What's happening right now is we're going to intro the man of the hour. Typically, one time a year, I get a fancy John, what we like to call like a spreadsheet show, where John just gets just positively turgid with numbers and statistics and things. But this year, we're so lucky we get two of these shows, John, because we're going to do this and obviously the regular end of the year show. This is your night to shine. You are the business editor at bloodygoodhorror.com. You're also the fancy numbers person. Please welcome John Schnars to the show.
God, you know how to make a guy feel special, Eric. I tell you.
Well, enjoy it.
Tell you what.
Enjoy it because the next thing I was going to say is Joe got dressed up and you look like a hobo with 5 o'clock shadow. So
Yeah. Well, do we need to revisit the fact that I had goddamn surgery last week? I told you I took my sling off. That was like a big moment for me.
I still think you should be wearing a tuxedo, but okay.
I can't shave, so Joe, while you might look cleanly coiffed, Casey will.
How many arms does it take you to shave? What kind of operation are you doing there?
Have you ever tried to shave your face with a razor with your non-dominant hand?
I'm just talking about your face, not your taint.
John, I do a lot of things with my non-dominant hand just to switch things up, right?
Yeah, it's called the stranger.
Yeah. I mean, look, I get it. I respect it, but I'm not putting a razor blade on my face with my left hand. So
anyway, coming up here, very briefly here, you're basically going to be the whole. You can explain your whole methodology, but we all voted. We all voted in the top 25. You took in the numbers. You crunched them. You're going to spit them back out at us. So get excited for that.
I'm getting nervous with you even talking about it right now.
We did have, before we get into that, we did have one breaking news type situation. So this happened, I'm pretty sure, like the day after we recorded last week. I woke up in the morning and I've got like 30 Twitter notifications tagging me in this video of this guy who proposes to his girlfriend. John, are you familiar with Joe Bob Briggs? Have you heard of this guy?
So I wasn't familiar until I met you and Joe, then you frickin' circle jerked each other for like 17 episodes about Joe. But no, yes, I know Joe.
So he's doing he's having a bit of a renaissance lately, John. I don't know if you're aware of this, but anyway, he's doing this road show, and this guy went to his show and he arranged beforehand to propose to his girlfriend. And like the king of kings that this guy is, he just had his beautiful red blazing bloody good horror shirt on while he did it. You got to watch it for a second. See, Casey didn't watch the whole thing, so he didn't catch it. If you got to watch it for a second, because he's got his back to the camera, but then he turns and he's got the big, BGH on. So
It's the classic logo too.
Yeah.
So we reached out to the guy. We're like, hey, dude, what's the story here? What's going on? And he wrote us a little email. So just as a little intro to our show here, we wanted to read it.
I was gonna say, could you give the guy give him a name, please?
Yeah,
Just-
Justin.
Justin.
Yes.
He's a Patreon as well.
And I think I believe
Joe.
I believe we sent him like a care package, right?
I have not yet.
Okay, we're going
Blanket
to.
apology to everyone. I have not shipped a ton of shirts to our $10 levels. I have not shipped any of the medals yet, and I have not shipped this guy.
Sick.
It's been a couple weeks, guys. All right, we'll get there.
All right, so we just wanted to read this quick. So he says, "Hey guys and CC, putting a plug into my proposal to the crowd for Bloody Good Horror was my original intention. Me wearing that BGH shirt was not an accident. But old Joe Bob gave me almost no time to do it. This story, I just gotta say, this story is amazing, and we can talk about it after we get through it. But
Well, and Eric, you should say, because Joe had reached out to him by email and basically was like, "Hey, we saw you were wearing the BGH shirt.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. You couldn't give us a plug." And that's why
okay.
he responded.
so that's
that
why he
way.
felt the need to defend himself. Got it.
Yes.
So
And,
he goes on to say, the proposal had been in the works for months. How I first pictured it was doing it before the show. I'd give a funny but heartwarming speech. I love how he's like casting a movie in his head here. Michelle accepts and we sit down. During the speech, I was going to point out that I'm a producer on the podcast Bloody Good Horror. And by producer, I mean Patreon contributor, but they don't have to know that. And to check out BGH because we love Joe Bob. About a week before, this is where it gets funny. About a week before the show, JB contacts me and says the proposal will happen after the show. And he wants to meet me at soundcheck before so we can go over the rules. Let me say that again. He wants to hang out. I was overjoyed that he was going to let me propose at his show. But now I get to meet him. Christmas came early for me. I've followed Joe Bob since 1991 when I started reading his column during Desert Storm in Stars and Stripes. So I looked this up, John. It looks like Stars and Stripes is like a military newspaper publication type of thing.
I mean, that was like the sort of assumption that I made when I saw the
Yeah.
email.
Yeah.
But I'm all right.
I'm just saying I confirmed that. I did some research
Yeah.
on LinkedIn.
No, good.
okay?
No, I appreciate that. Yes.
At the sound check, he asked me, how much time do I need? I tell him 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Did I say 10?
So brazen.
Did I
so
say 10?
brazen.
I meant 5. You need a whole 5 minutes? Did I say 5? I meant 2. Joe Bob tells me at the end of the show, everyone will want to go home and he won't tie them up that long after a 2-hour show. So he said he'd give me 1 minute from the moment I stand up. So yeah, I was a little pressed for time. Okay, I will take the 1 minute, especially being that I got to meet him. His male girl, Darcy, was also at the show. She was the one who recorded the video. She was so sweet and almost as excited as I was for the proposal. In the end, everything went off without a glitch, and I'm very happy. Thank you guys for everything, the gifts, the outstanding podcast, and the ability to make me laugh during some long hours at work. Enclosed is a picture of the BGH shirt now with Joe Bob's autograph. Have a great day,
Ooh.
and keep up the good work, Justin. So that was just a feel-good thing. I wanted to read
Yeah.
it. I also just wanted to say the balls on this guy for asking Joe Bob for 10 minutes of his show is
That's
incredible.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like King Kong-sized balls this guy has.
What would you even say in a 10-minute proposal?
10
Wow.
minutes
no.
is like a legit stand-up set. That's what I love about it.
Yeah.
It's like, I have some things I got to say, man. I don't know,
No,
That's great.
no, look, just get it all out, all the feelings. I'm here. I would be here for that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well.
And how awkward would it have been if he spent more of that 10 minutes plugging BGH than proposing to his wife?
And now let me tell you about Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a good chance she would have said no if. That's...
So Joe first,
Probably the
first
best.
joined the show around episode 100.
Yeah.
He's like page turn. It's like he's like reading from
No.
his hymnal. That listen, it's
Many congrats.
we have the best listeners in the world. The fact that like this is the biggest moment of his life, and he was thinking about giving us, a little
Yeah.
Easter egg is really neat. So we thank him. We thank everybody that represents us like that. I think at this point, so a few weeks ago, one of our other listeners and a loyal Patreon, Joe, our patron Joe runs a theater, and Joe Bob came through his town, And Joe's the one who got us the bumper that we played 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. So I like to think at this point that Joe Bob thinks that we're like sending people to like infiltrate his live tour across the country. You know what I mean? So,
We're gonna get a cease and desist letter from Joe Bob pretty soon. Is what you're angling at.
it's been a weird year. Is what I'm getting at. But anyway,
Yeah,
thanks.
but at least doesn't have to pay the postage for that cease and desist. He could just hand it to Joe and Eric standing outside his bedroom window.
There you go,
Hey guys, here. All right, John. It is time.
Eric.
I'm gonna do my best not to zone out here. I'm pretty excited, but I'm sure you have a lot of numbers. I'm not very good with numbers, but we're gonna see how this goes.
Let's see where we go.
All right, John. It is time. Let us talk about the top 25 films of the decade. We're gonna use that tonight just as your generic theme music. That's like in the movie when you show up on screen. This just plays in the background.
I mean, you're gonna use like multiple stingers as I'm going. You're just, like no warning. Just
Anytime you say a really schnarzy thing, I'm just gonna hit it.
I like that. I like it a lot.
Yeah, guys, I'm very excited. I'm probably the end of the year show. I tend to be a little drunker, let's say, than I am right now. But I'm feeling good. I'm very excited. As Eric said, a lot of numbers. So just to kind of give everybody a sense of how things are going to go, we're going to count down the top 25. The way we got there, as Eric mentioned, we had 15 BGH contributors. It's essentially anyone that you've heard on this show or who has written something for the Bloody Good Horror website over the last, let's say, year or so. They were offered a ballot. The ballot had 154 films on it. We put this ballot together. I think we talked about it a little bit on the show. The ballot itself was somewhat contentious. And to anyone who has complained about the ballot, I say, go fuck yourself.
No, I like it. Yeah.
I
Boom.
100%.
Roasted.
I tried to crowdsource this ballot several times, got very little feedback, and was like, cool, this is the ballot now.
Can I tell you something, John? Like, so personally,
please,
I read
please.
the whole thing over. It is very hard to like take in that amount of information and be like, oh, you missed this one thing. Now, I say that, but when we gave it up to the slackers, everyone had an opinion, John. You know what they say about opinions.
No,
Well,
that's-
and so I should say,
We
I
listen. We
added-
used a broad, like we've said this before, but we go with the big tent theory of genre films at Bloody Good Horror.
That is totally true. And I would say that even though I was very firm in saying I would not add anything to the ballot, I think I added 2 films to the ballot pretty close to the end. So
Just to get people to shut up.
yeah, mostly so that people would chill out. And
You guys made John
and
mad.
also-
Do you know how often John gets legit mad on the show? Like, not that often.
Well, I mean, the other, so the way again, not to go too deep into it, but the way the ballot was put together was mostly we have a top 10 list from every single one of the years of the decade. We've done the top 10 vote. So I went back to all of those top 10 votes and pulled shit that didn't even make those lists, but got a lot of votes at that time. So I felt like it was a pretty comprehensive list. Again, 150 films for 10 years. And they're all good, right?
I mean,
Like, there's a lot
to
of
your
good-
point, like if there was something that only one person was going to put on their list, it didn't really matter because it's we have so many voters, you're not going to sway the whole thing.
Well, so let's get to that. Let me give you I just want to again to level set how the rest of this, let's say, hour is going to play out. We're going to count down the top 25. The top 25 was arrived at by let's say numbers magic, but essentially I took all the ballots and I gave a weighting that when you add it up, essentially like a 1 was worth a certain number of points and a 25 was worth a different number of points. And when you add it up and average it all out, you get a stack rank that is essentially the collective wisdom of the Bloody Good Horror crew. It's the same general
Wisdom,
methodology.
quote,
Yeah.
unquote.
But it's the same general methodology I use for the top 10 list at the end of the year. What I love about it is that, and we'll talk about the sort of diversity of the list, because I think it's actually one of the most important points. While there's a ton of diversity of the 15 lists that go into this, the final list, I look at it and I'm like, this is a thing of beauty. I really feel good about the top 25 that we ended up with.
I have a lot of thoughts about the decade on the whole, and they're all positive for the most part.
You don't mean like diversity of the cast, right? Like where, like for the most part, like.
Well, wait, hold on. The voting group was fairly
It would
diverse.
really
We had a couple
help if
Canadians
CC was here
involved.
right now.
John, do you know Canadian isn't a race, right?
Oh,
We
they're
have-
different.
We have
They're different, Joe.
Joe. We have several Canadians.
Mm,
That's true.
they're invading.
So let me give you some high level stats just to set the mood, so to speak, and then what we're gonna do is while we're counting on the list, each of us we're gonna have a little close up, a little close up peek on each of our lists. Hopefully CC's gonna arrive at some point because I pulled a bunch of stats from her list. I have some information from each of your lists. And we'll kind of take some time to hear about each of our individual sort of methodologies, and then we'll get to number one.
I'll be honest, I'm very excited because I don't even remember what I put at number one, like let alone like my top 10 or 25. Like,
Well, I do have everyone's list handy if needed. We should also say, and we hope people will stay for the end here. For the first time, we have a fan vote, and what I mean is we offered the ballot to patrons. Now, patrons were allowed to pick 10 films, and so I have a patron top 10 calculated very similarly to how I did the BGH vote. And so I'm like sort of doubly numbers excited because I have just so many
Okay,
numbers.
John, give me numbers.
All right.
available in doubly.
Total numbers of of the 15 ballots across the Bloody Good Heart crew, there was 100 different films received a vote. So 100 out of the 154 films appeared on one ballot. There was, and I mean this will be no surprise, at least one movie from every year. The most represented year in the top 25, 2018. So last year.
Yeah, that's I
Not
can see that.
surprising.
The least represented year, 2011 and 2014, only had one film.
Huh.
So
Okay.
Oh, wow.
when we look at all of the 100 films that received a vote, so that's like the most represented and least represented I just gave you was for the top 25. If you look at all of the 100, and I thought this was interesting, and you look at the years that were most represented, there's this like really interesting high point in the decade from 2015 to 2018. There were 12 to 13 films in every single one of those years, and in the years before that, there was like 5 to 6 films. 2019 right now is sitting at like 5, 6. I mean, obviously we're not all the way at the end of the year. There's some interesting
I
stuff
mean, that
coming out.
kind of
but-
makes sense because like when the decade started, we were really still snapping out of the early 2000s doldrums. I feel like, you know what I mean? And then it's like just been this constant upward trajectory. I think.
And we'll talk about it as we kind of go through the films. But there's just also been a deluge. I mean, we've talked about it for years in distribution channels, so we've seen so much more diversity. I mean, there's a lot that plays into it. 9. So of the 15 BGH ballots, there were 9 different movies that were listed number one overall. Yeah. So that was probably more than I was expecting for sure. Only one film, and it actually does end up being the number one film, was on all 15 ballots.
Oh.
So that again also kind of surprised me.
You added Crawl at the end of the year? Good for you.
There were 30 movies. So of the 100 movies, 30 of them only appeared on one ballot. So sort of to your point, Eric, earlier, like there was a ton of just like one-off folks, and we'll talk about some of them were movies that people had really high on their list. So we'll get to that. And the final stat here before we get into it, the BGH list that had the closest to the final 25. So the person in the voting group who had the most of the 25, John Shelton.
Wow.
Well, he's always been a bit of a kiss ass, so that doesn't surprise
There
me.
you go. But here's the thing: he only had 18 of the 25 films. So even a lot of diversity there.
I mean, every year we do this, we have more non-main show, right? I mean, Shelton's been on the show, but when I say main show, like the core 5 of us, right? So, like when we started doing year-end lists in 2010, it was mostly just us and a handful of other people. It's like, so you're getting a more interesting like pool of data as every year goes on. It gets bigger.
Oh yeah.
A worse pool, you would say.
It's diluting, is what I'm saying. You know, it's like a dilution.
Who drained the swamp? I think is what we need to do. Who had the least, like the biggest number of movies that didn't make the top 10?
Interesting. So this is actually one of the stats that I pulled for each of us. I believe. I'm just looking to double check. So I have my big spreadsheet here. So if you do all want to ask questions,
sounds hot.
It was our own Casey.
Oh, wow.
Casey, 11 of the 25 on your list. So you were the most diversified, one might say.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow. When I look at Casey, I think that guy's diverse.
Well, Joe, you were diverse in a different way. We're gonna get to it, guys. Just don't get me ahead of myself here. Let's all right. So really quick, some honorable mentions. So these are basically the first 3 films that don't make the list. They were close, but there was definitely a clear line at 25. I just thought these were worth mentioning. They received a bunch of different votes. A Quiet Place, Black Coat's Daughter, Troll Hunter. None of them make the top 25.
What the fuck?
I'm
Troll
shocked.
Hunter?
I'm
out.
shocked.
I know.
I'm actually shocked.
It was Troll Hunter for me. It was up there.
Oh, we're gonna get there. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
I'm
We're
shocked
gonna come
about.
back to it, Joe.
I'm shocked about Troll Hunter and Black Coat's Daughter, honestly. Although that one's maybe a little more divisive.
Again,
Daughter
like
was
right
like
off the bat, proving our point that we shouldn't let these mongoloids that write for the site send in their votes.
I don't know that word. We'll see.
Yeah.
Be careful there, Joe.
All right. So to give you a sense, so I was actually going to go first. I'll give you some stats about my list. I can talk a little bit about some things. The question I asked everybody to prep before the show, we're going to do it when we kind of touch on everyone's list, was what movie didn't make your top 25, but that you just want to give a little tip of the hat to. So some stats from my list. I had 16 films on the final 25 of the final 25. I had 16. The highest rated film on my list that didn't make the top 25 was my 9th rated film, Super 8. I don't know what the hell is the matter with the rest of you. I don't know how it didn't make your list, but I was really surprised. It was only on about 3 other lists.
Yeah, I don't think it was on
Hey,
mine.
I had it.
You did. Casey and I both definitely had that high. Yeah, Super 8 was my number 9. This is another like one that blew my mind. So I pulled the other stat that I was really interested to see. Unique film. So this is a movie that I put on my list that none of the other 15 or 14 voters had on their list. For me, that movie was my 20th film, The Conjuring.
Oh,
I didn't have that?
I didn't.
You did
I
not
know
have
I
it.
didn't.
How is that possible? I love being conjured.
You did not have The Conjuring. When we get to the patron vote, though, you will find that I have some brethren in the respect for The Conjuring. I was surprised because to me, The Conjuring, it's not that I look back on it and think it's like my favorite film of the decade, but it's like a really important movie of the last 10 years.
See, I had one Wandaverse movie, and that wasn't the one, and I pretty much my current bias against those movies basically just spoiled me on the rest of them. So
Man,
I voted with bias, John, is what I'm telling you.
I will say I obviously did not put much effort into my list because I loved that movie.
Oh, I see. Joe's shocked.
Joe.
Joe's shocked that he didn't put it on his list. That's fine.
Yeah, that's where he's going right now. No, well, Joe, it wasn't just you. It was literally all of the other BGH voters. So, it is what it is. Look, we're going to go through this for each of us. I actually only had one movie that no one else voted for. Everybody else had more than one. So yeah, those are mine. The movie for me that didn't make my list that I honest to God wanted to get on my list and I just couldn't do it was Unfriended. To me, again, it's like another movie that it's not that it's like the greatest film of all time.
Such a surprise.
I think it's super I will think about that movie more than I think about a lot of other movies from the decade, I guess, is where I land on it.
I mean, yeah, look, when I looked at this, there were 25 really good movies just outside of the top 25 for me. You know what I mean? My list was 25 bangers. You know what I mean? I had no trouble putting together. It was cutting them down was more the issue,
No, I totally agree. I had a short list of about 50 and then kind of carved away from there. And that's where I landed. So that was my list. So let's get into it. Here we are. We're at number 25. Number 25. And number 25 and number 24 both come from the year 2010. I think they're the only two 2010 films on the list. The Last Exorcism, number 25.
I bet
Number
you I
24.
single-handedly shot that up the list.
So Eric, you and I both had it pretty high. It was not super highly voted. I think it was. I can pull the numbers. I think it was probably on about 5 or 6 lists, but I also had it pretty high as well.
I had it on mine.
I think it's most well known across the world as being the only movie that Joe and I have ever had a mandate to go see.
I was gonna say, like, honestly, I don't even think I liked the movie, but it
We
made
ate-
my list because of, you know.
We ate Panera beforehand. I got mac and
Because
cheese.
you guys shared popcorn.
Yeah.
I think
it would've-
I think I snuck food in from Panera actually. That was my joint at that.
That
theater.
is true. You brought an entire thing of cream of mushroom and ate a whole bread bowl
I
right
did
there
not.
in the sea.
That's false. I did not do that.
So number 24, Black Swan. Number 23, The Invitation.
Hmm.
22, Evil Dead. And 21, Creep.
Huh.
Gray open, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I still don't get the love for creep.
Creep. Well, I mean, look, it was on a lot of lists. I don't know. That's another one. When I think about Creep,
it's so memorable.
well, because it's like the weirdest goddamn movie. It has two characters. There's two
Yeah.
characters in the entire movie.
It was one
Like,
of the
it's-
first times for me too that I was like, oh snap! Like a Netflix movie can be really good.
Yeah. So that was something that I like started to like really kind of dig around on, because as we go through the list, you'll kind of see. I was curious how many of these were going to be direct to streaming, essentially. The short answer is not that many. So The Invitation, I believe, was, Creep was. There's only probably 2 or 3 others that are truly direct to streaming. Now the hard part is like some of the older ones, like the 2010 to 2014 stuff, was basically had to go theatrical. There wasn't necessarily that same
Yeah.
outlet.
CC, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Hi.
Here's,
Oh, well, there she is.
here's my fun bit of trivia for the first 5 of our best of the decade. I still haven't seen Black Swan.
Oh,
Me either,
dude,
actually.
You gotta
Yeah.
see it, dude.
Hmm.
You got it's
Yeah.
So good.
I checked it out honestly in prep. There was about 5 movies that I watched to prep for making my list. That was one of them, and it ended up making my list.
It's incredible.
It's quite
If
good.
I check it out this weekend, can we redo this show just in case?
Yeah, no, we'll just re-record. That's fine.
All right, cool.
Let's go to Mr. Casey.
Oh,
Let's talk about your list. As we discussed, the films on your list that were on the top 25, only 11. It was the smallest number. And in fact, your highest rated film not on the final list. Do you know what it was?
I'm gonna say my number 1.
Yes, correct.
Let Me In.
Yes.
Oh wow.
I was really like, I won't say shocked, but I was surprised because like when I did all the numbers, I was like, holy shit, there it is.
Yeah,
How's that
I
feel?
really like that movie a lot. I really bought into the whole twisted angle of the love story, especially once they revealed what happens, when she was drawing that kid in and you realize who the old man was. That was just kind of blew me away. So
It was a really good remake, and Elias Codius or Kate, whatever how you say that dude's name, he was like pretty great.
yeah,
Casey Jones.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's really what I
Yeah.
wanted to say, but I was trying to be sophisticated, CC.
I don't
As
know.
the people
it's Casey
over
Jones.
30-year-olds, 30 years old called. No, I mean, Kate, I think it's a really good example of. I mean, that's a really, really good movie, and I think the year that it came out, it was maybe 2010, 2011.
yeah.
It was definitely in our. It was like in our top 3 or 4 as a
Oh, yeah.
group on our list. So, a really strong one. You had 2 unique films, so films that only you had on your list of the entire voting group. The Visit at number 16 and The World's End at number 23.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. I was
I
most surprised by
would
The
have
Visit.
thought it would have been The Void,
No.
because that's one that not a lot of people probably have watched.
I mean, it might have also been like only one other person. So literally,
Yeah.
like you had to be unique. In this case, you had 2.
I think we should
so
take the
yeah.
opportunity, John, too, to say I don't. You were telling us like we were kind of talking about the format pre-show. Like we're really gonna kind of dig into the lists and the numbers. But if you want to hear us talk about any of these movies in depth, we did a show on every movie in the top 25. So you can go to patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror, become a patron, and at one of the levels you can get access to the whole catalog and listen to all these shows. You can also listen to our like past year-end episodes. You know what I mean? So if you feel like we're kind of brushing over something, it's because we've covered sort of all this stuff in depth already.
Well, we also
We
don't
should-
want the show to be
12 hours long.
6.5 hours long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should mention that I am not on every episode of movies in the top 20. Like, people are going to be going there and signing up and paying, and they'll be like, "What the fuck? I'm listening to Black Swan."
Hold on.
Or-
Where's Joe?
yeah.
No refunds too. We should have said
Yeah.
that up front. Yeah. So, Casey, did you have a movie? What was the movie that didn't make your list?
So it depends on how you want to look at it. So, because there was a couple movies on there, I tried to, when I made my list, stick to stuff that I figured were fairly horror, had some horror elements. The movie that I would have put on my list if I wasn't doing that would have been Dread, because I was really impressed by that movie. But it's more of an action movie to me.
Was it on the ballot?
Oh, Dread.
Was
Yes,
that an option? Jesus.
it was.
Yeah.
Looking at
It
the
was-
copy I've got.
It was
here
on the
from
All right,
ballot.
there you go. No,
It was on the
I
ballot.
trust-
Yeah. Because I saw it and kind of went,
Yeah,
I
and
love
if
that
you go-
movie. So,
If you want to keep it strictly horror, I would actually probably go with Creep, because that one really impressed with me. Like Eric was saying before, it was memorable, it was weird, and I really dug it. But it wasn't just quite enough to bump everything off to the bottom of my list.
all right, two good ones. All right, let's dip back in to the list. Number 20, Happy Death Day.
this is the best. So much fun.
Happy Death Day to You did not make the final cut, but
Still-
Happy Death Day.
Still
All
good.
right. No, very good. Number 19, Cam. One of our 2018 direct to Netflix.
That's really
okay.
interesting. I'm surprised. John, are we gonna? I don't want to rush you. Are we gonna get a Blumhouse statistic at some point in this list?
I can maybe do one while we're talking. We'll see. I don't know. That might be too much for my
That's
brain.
a lot.
I did not pull like yeah. It's a good call. I
I'm
should.
di-
I
I'm
should look.
disappointed, but okay.
I'll see what I can do while we're talking. Okay. So Cam, number 18, Suspiria.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fun.
Still my
Suspiria-
favorite Rihanna song.
I feel like
that
it's-
that was another one I went back to, and I was so glad that I did because it's fucking crazy.
Which one? The Suspiria. remake?
Suspiria.
Yeah, I feel like
Suspiria.
this one on the list should just say Tilda Swinton and then just list several movies underneath.
Yeah.
Also, just one of the goriest films.
It's wild.
I mean,
yeah, it's
of,
wild.
of the decade, I would say. So you've got a couple of decapitations / like I don't know defenestrations, or there's a lot of weird shit going on in that movie.
I mean, there's a
Um,
black mass. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, full on. Number 17, The Loved Ones.
Mm.
What is
When did that come out? That must have
Uh,
just eked in the
That's the Australian one. about
Yeah,
that.
it was really
2010 or
good.
Oh, I had that on my list.
like what year was that?
God bless you, Joe. 2012, Eric. 2012
okay.
For The Loved Ones. Yeah, and I should say, I think I have this stat later. The Loved Ones was there was a couple of films in the patron vote that just did not register, and Loved Ones was up there. There's one that was even lower, but Loved Ones was quite low in the patron.
What you're saying
Uh,
is it was high in ours, but they didn't vote for it a lot.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Number
Hmm.
17.
Well, they also only
Um,
picked 10 movies.
No, well, I'm gonna get into it because you're right. There's definitely some differences in the way that it worked out. Really quickly, 16, The Babadook.
Good, I love that Babadook.
I'll be honest, that was another one that I was kind of surprised about because I sort of I feel like that's a movie that maybe normies, if you asked them.
I think
would be
people were
your top 10?
I think people were
Yes,
generally a little
people.
higher on that than we were at the time.
Yeah.
It was a top 5 Schnarr's pronunciation for me for the last decade. I would say it's like Babadook and
Babadook?
I think
Rotten
a
Tomatoes.
lot of normies have heard about that. And
No,
it's
I
gotten
mean,
a
I don't-
lot of buzz. Yeah.
Oh, you think so? Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so there you go. That's number 20 through 16. Happy Death Day, Cam, Suspiria, The Loved Ones, The Babadook. The next list I'd like to dig into is the High Priestess herself,
Oh.
Cece.
Ooh.
Delightful.
Hi.
I'm glad you made it. I had like tried to time you so that you were, you know.
I appreciate the extra thought.
So hopefully you picked up on what we're doing here.
Kind
with
of.
Casey's. All right, you're just roll with
We
it.
can wing it.
So the films that you had on your list that were also on the top 25, you had 13. So
Oh,
you were right in the middle.
That's a nice
You were
spooky
happy.
I was
number.
like, that's not so bad, is it?
No, well, it's none of it's bad or good. It's just an interesting data point.
True, but it's
Um,
not as bad as Casey.
The the highest rated film on your list that was not on the final top 25 was, and it was an honorable mention, The Black Coat's Daughter. You had at number 3.
Mm.
Wow.
Great.
And it
Wow.
wasn't on the top
Yeah,
25?
just missed.
It just
Man.
missed. It was, let's say, 27.
Cece, we already talked at the top of the show about how dumb everybody outside of these 5 are. If you want to give your own opinion, though, feel free to
Totally
jump in.
dumb. I mean,
Totally dumb.
yeah, I have such a special place for the Blackcoat's daughter, but
Best.
know.
Do we know what
stabbing.
Oz Perkins is up to? Like, he had those 2 movies come out like right next to each
I
other.
thought that we had talked about he was doing something else, but now
mean-
that you say that, I don't think that we've talked about it
Based on
or
that,
that we've heard anything.
based on that movie, he might be up to actual murder.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
definitely he's coming from a dark place.
The
Like,
most-
you
Yeah.
might worry about him.
Maybe the most obscene stabbing I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, what did he
Uh,
do on Legally Blonde? Oh, he was
might-
in Legally Blonde.
Yeah, he
he's-
might have been an
yeah,
actor.
He's the
Yeah.
weirdo
Oh, funny.
law student
I'm gonna Google
that's in
this
her
guy.
study group.
Cece, your unique film.
Oh.
So the films that only you voted
Sorry,
for.
I don't mean to cut you off, John, but he's actually
They're not important, John.
he's writing a head full of ghosts. He's
Oh shit,
Oh.
that's
Yeah.
gonna be so intense.
I never looked
Yeah,
this guy
he's-
up. He's kind of dreamy.
writing and directing it. That's gonna be awesome.
For those of you who have not read that book, it's a Paul Tremblay book, and he is very intense. And to see Oz Perkins handle that is going to be really bizarre.
Yeah, pretty much just a punch in the stomach for
Yes,
like 100
I mean,
pages.
I listened to the audiobook of that, and there were several times I had to stop because it was like freaking me out to listen to. So that's awesome.
All right. Well, Oz Perkins,
Yeah.
we're worried for you, bud. Your CZ, your unique film. So these are movies that only you had on your ballot.
Oh, man, can't wait for this.
Number 13, Assassination Nation,
Oh,
Hell yeah.
and number 15, Split.
oh, did I have?
Split wasn't on anybody else's list?
I think it was on mine.
Wow.
Or maybe you got booted at the last
No,
minute.
It
Mhm.
did not, Eric. It was not on your list.
Yeah, I think I
I will
booted
be
it.
honest with you. When I saw Split on the list, I was like doing the numbers the other day, and I like had to take a second to be like, "What the fuck is Split?" And then it
John,
did come
John,
back
does
to
the
me eventually.
phrase? Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was sorry. I was thinking
You were
about
thinking of Glass?
Splice.
Splice? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that was. I was like, wait, did I misspell Splice? Like, what's going on here?
If
And then
there's
I was
my
like, oh,
largest
yeah, Split.
takeaway from writing this list is people need to get more goddamn creative with the names of their movies. I cannot tell you how many movies I had to Google and be like, what in the hell was that?
Yeah, I had the same issue.
Well, I mean,
Like,
I realized I just maybe thought that Split was that good because of, I mean, the performance
Yeah.
in general. But I thought that, I mean,
it's great.
the thought of being kept in someone's basement by a schizophrenic is super terrifying. And I thought that was played out
Yeah.
pretty well outside of the superhero aspect of it that, it connects to. But
Well, I was gonna say, for me, honestly, I actually really like that movie as well. You don't have to justify your opinions.
I mean, I thought that's what this show was about. Was just
Oh.
Cece is like
your opinions.
Cece is semi-reacting right now, like she's being interrogated.
Hmm.
No, but I was gonna say, I feel like the Glass experience
Yeah.
has colored me against Split at this point.
Oh, see, I haven't seen
100%.
Glass, though, so maybe that's why.
Oh, boy.
I think I listened to that episode and was like, I'm not watching that shit. So
Hey John, hey John.
And you were also like, are Eric and Jason still friends? Or
John, was Glass on anyone's list, John?
no, it was not. It wasn't on the ballot,
Oh, that's probably for the best.
and no one requested it. No one.
no one requested it.
Cece, did you have a movie that did not make your list that you were like, this is a movie I want to ride for?
I mean, I'm
continue.
just ready for some like hot takes, but I wasn't going to ask you to add it to the ballot. But I mean, Lords of Salem would have made my top 25.
Nice,
Ooh.
bold. I like it.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm surprised that wasn't on the ballot.
I know.
John.
I was really surprised, but after I
You-
saw the
you
Slack
all
that
were-
so many people were so mad about movies not being on it, I was like, it's okay.
See what you
Again,
did,
Cece,
patrons.
to be
See
fair,
what you did.
You had a chance to weigh in before I locked the ballot. It's all
It's
good.
fine.
Yeah.
Hey, look, that's a lot of work, and I wasn't about to argue with your workload, so
Yeah.
it's fine.
Hey,
It's, I don't
Uh,
think it's that much
I have a
work,
question. I have a
really.
spreadsheet question, John. So I'm looking at my list. Can I
Mm.
but it's all random. The list is like in alphabetical order. Can I
Yeah.
click on something to just see my numbers in that order?
Yes, you can sort it. Yes, that's something a spreadsheet will let
That's
you
such
do.
a dad question.
How do I do that?
Do you,
Explain. On the show, John, explain pivot tables to me.
I don't know what that is, dude. Joe,
Joe, I
you
use
guys
that to
listen. You
teach
guys were
pivot
helping me
tables,
set up
so-
that spreadsheet the other day, and I was blown away that you were able to get numbers to just populate in a field.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have no idea.
Some people do this every day, Eric, all day.
They're wizards.
Special powers. Let's keep things rolling with the list here. We are in the top 15. We are at number 15. That film is You're Next.
No.
I love
That
it.
wasn't on my list.
That
at
movie's
all,
that
was it?
movie's great. I think it's on mine.
No.
Cece, I don't know. I'm not looking at your list right now. Let's
I'm sorry, that was a rhetorical question that I was just speaking out loud to the group. I'll tell you that no, it was not on my list.
Yeah. Okay. Number 14, Ex Machina.
Huh.
Loved it. Higher on my list, but 14, pretty good. We're in the range of, I feel very strongly that all of these are very good films.
Oh,
so.
I found it nearly impossible to order my top 15, and so I'm gonna be honest, I didn't put a super ton of thought in. Like I just kind of went with my gut and just went print because like they're incredible. Like these top 15 movies are amazing
Yeah.
across the board.
Number 13, Raw.
Yes.
Mm.
Raw. Number 12.
Oh, that's
Easy.
with the bee sting face guy, right? I could do without him.
Beast
Wait,
face?
what?
Face. What is
What?
that?
Raw, isn't Raw that movie where the guy sells like people's flesh or whatever?
No, 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 no.
No, it's the French
yeah.
movie where the girl and her sister find out they're cannibals.
Yeah, they're at
The
the veterinary
veterinarian movie.
school.
Ah,
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
like
cool.
that.
You're
either.
talking about Caleb Landry Jones, your favorite actor.
Yeah. Yeah, that
No,
sucks.
that's like antiviral? What? I don't know. What-
Antiviral.
God. I
Yeah,
think
it
that's,
was
that's what it
antiviral.
is. You're right.
Is it?
yeah.
I think that was last decade. I think that was a decade ago.
No, that is not that long ago.
I don't know. Number 12, Revenge,
Yes.
2018. I call this the Shudder movie. That's just like, I feel like this is the movie that kind of.
Do you mean prevenge? No, revenge.
No,
No,
revenge.
Revenge.
You know where you and I went head to head, and I don't know if
That's
we're
fair.
really friends after that.
All right. 2012 antiviral.
I got nothing. Oh,
There you go.
never mind. I just
It
saw
was
the
only
poster.
you,
Never mind.
me,
Never
you,
mind.
me, Sophie, and Joe on that show.
Oh, yeah,
Never mind.
that was pretty
That
much
was Ginger Girls.
I don't want to talk about it.
pretty much
I
where
do.
10 minutes in, Eric and I realized we should just shut up and
Yeah, Revenge, number 12. Number 11, Attack the Block, 2011.
It's great.
Former number 1 film of the year,
Hmm.
Attack
Yeah.
the Block. So there you go.
Attack the Block. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't remember a ton from that movie, but I felt like it needed to be on there.
Yeah, so that's one that I wanted to go back and
It was so long
rewatch
ago.
just to see if I needed it to be higher on my list, honestly. But
it's so great. It was
Yeah.
really good.
I just remember what's his name. God, I always
Mark?
Nick Frost.
Forget him?
Yeah, no, Nick Frost, isn't that the actor who
Yeah,
is like
he's
the
in there.
girlfriend?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing in that movie.
Did Mark
Uh,
submit a list? I'm curious where this was on Mark's.
100% Mark submitted a list. Mark actually had 17 of the films. He was right behind John. Where
Do you
was it?
have his in front of you? Because I'm curious, because he loved this movie.
Yeah, I do have his in front of me, and stand by. I am pulling it up. He had it like number 12.
Huh.
So he was actually pretty close to where it landed. So there you go.
I'm
Joe.
disappointed.
Let's talk about Joe.
Ooh.
Something
do you
I've
wanna
been
know?
just waiting to say.
What do you
all day.
turn ons,
Uh,
turn offs, fetishes?
Joe, you've already indicated that you don't remember which films are on your list.
I pulled mine up. I kind of wanted to be surprised as we went, but your whole what movie didn't make my list that I actually wish had question like frightened me because I didn't know what my list was. So I've got it in front of me.
Well, all right. So let me give you so the films on your list that were on the final list 12. So you were actually you and Casey right there.
Well,
The
Joe
hi-
looks about as diverse as I do, so
Well,
Ooh, Zinni.
I have a half Tejano daughter, so
Jesus Christ. Let's not get into who's a halftime.
I'm sorry. Potrano.
There you go. So the highest rated film, we already hit this one. Troll Hunter, number 2 on your list, did not make the final list.
I am bad. Am I the only one who had it on my list?
No, it was an honorable mention. It was right there, but just
Yeah,
you know, just missed
it was
out.
on my list. Joe, so
I do not.
I loved that movie. I am baffled as to why more people didn't have it. You know, maybe it was the subtitles. I'm obviously more cultured than
Yeah.
the rest of those hillbillies that are submitting their
There you
their
go.
thoughts, but you know, whatever.
It was definitely that. You, though, did have by far the most unique films on your list.
Ugh.
7 movies
Oh.
listed by Joe, not listed by any other. I honestly like went back and was like, hold on, did I screw this list up?
John, he's a
but
special.
then again,
He's a special guy. Okay.
no. Well, I actually think it's very instructive to understand Joe, and because they're not bad movies, they're good movies. So, your number 3, Krampus, no one else had on their list, which I was actually really surprised about.
What?
Yeah. Number 17, you had The Ritual, which
I
actually got a lot of love from the patrons too. So
Yeah. I struggled with having that higher because I really enjoyed it.
But I mean, listen.
Well-
To be clear, though, like tons of movies made my list that I really like Krampus. I just like. It's hard to cut them down.
Eric,
You know.
are
Like,
we talking about me now, or are we talking about
I'm just
you?
saying. Like, I feel
Just
like
curious.
you guys. You seem to be upset that nobody's giving.
Can
it-
we finish with Eric and then maybe go back to me?
no, but hold on. The theme of your unique part of your list is great. So The Ritual, Lords of Chaos at number 18, As Above, So Below, Warm Bodies, Deathgasm, Blair Witch, 2016, whatever the Blair Witch.
Blair Witch?
Honestly, I know that movie's not great, but it terrified me like
Wow.
to the core. I had to call Leslie after I got out of that movie, and I was like, I don't think I can do the podcast anymore. I feel like I'm gonna throw up.
You know what, Joe? I respect the purity of that answer. So,
Yeah.
I give you props.
But you had basically every metal adjacent film that was on the ballot you had in your list, which I full respect.
Very
Well, a
nice.
lot of mine, like, and so I didn't so much struggle with the order of mine. I struggled with I struggled more with my bottom 10 than I did my top 10, probably. Like, what didn't make the cut. And a lot of them, like Blair Witch, like, I really enjoyed the theater experience. As Above, So Below, I loved that episode. It was Cece's first episode, and I thought we had a blast on it. Like, it has, like, good nostalgia for me. I mean, Deathgasm, for obvious reasons.
You
Lords
have a
of
Deathgasm every day. So.
Warm Bodies I put on mine, and like it solely made my list because that's the first movie. Like we actually took Mia to see that when she was a baby because they had one of those like bring your kids, like one of those.
It was like an appropriate time to bring your child to the
Yes,
theater.
yeah, it was like those like Tuesday afternoon. We'll just dim the lights. Like it was a fun experience. So
This was like a trip down memory lane, Joe list.
yeah,
almost.
it's a lot of them weren't so much that I thought the movies were great, but I just like enjoyed this experience. So that's why they made the list.
I love that. I love that. The list is yours, Joe. Yours to do with what you want.
Yeah.
There you go. Joe, did you have a film that didn't make the list that you want to ride for?
I'm surprised Climax didn't make mine, but Conjuring, I'm blown away. Like honestly, that's just an oversight because same reason. I really enjoyed that. I watched it later with Leslie at home, and like I loved it. Like it really scared the shit out of me.
To reiterate, for people who might be confused, Joe is blown away that Conjuring didn't make his own list in which he had complete control of.
Yeah.
I just want
To
to.
the
It's a little
like,
confusing.
I'm looking at what was above and below Conjuring on like the ballot to see if maybe I just screwed up and put the number next to something else.
It did have a "the" in front of it, so it was like with the other "the" movies.
You know what? It did because I see Conjuring 2 does not have the, and it's up top. So I put the blame on you, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's I'll take that. I'll take
All I
that
remember
one.
from The Conjuring is the hands going like this in front of her
Yeah.
face. That's
Yeah.
it.
Well, that was in the trailer too. I feel
Yeah,
like.
that's why I remember. I saw
Joe,
it
that was my
12,000
unique
times.
film. So I'm actually it all worked out for me because now I have a unique film. So, cool. All right. Well, there you go, Joe. That was your moment. Let's keep it down for the next 20. No, I'm kidding.
Is that it? Should we do the goodbyes?
We are in the top 10 here. All right. The top 10 of the decade. Here we go. Number 10. What We Do in the Shadows.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. I would actually vote that this, or if I had to pick based on sort of like where this landed, this was like the one that people probably like, I don't want to say wrestled with the most, but because it's a comedy, it's like kind of where do you put it into a top of the best of the decade horror?
I mean, listen,
thing?
to some extent, I understand the quibbling with. We have a lot of sci-fi on here. There was the infamous year that Snowpiercer was a #1. People rioted, but like, it's a horror comedy. It's a horror movie. Like I don't understand at all. Like not including things because they're kind of funny. Like it's a genre of movie, like through and through.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I totally agree on the and honestly, like I don't like it shows up a lot on the patron list as well. Like I don't like it's more. There was no one that had this number one. We're not quite to that segment of the list, but yeah, there were it's up there. Number 9, Annihilation. Number 8, Us.
I feel like all these movies now are just hitting me in the right place. I'm just like,
Well, so interestingly, number 8 and then number 7, Midsummer, both of our 2019 films in the top 10. So, number 6, Hereditary. So Midsummer 7, Hereditary number 6. I thought that was also poignant. There you go.
Beautiful.
We're there, guys. We're at the top 5, but first, we're gonna need to talk about Eric.
Oh boy.
Do you
Eric,
remember
before we get into it? Eric, very active on Slack right now. Just took a quick.
Very
look.
I'm trying to stay
Son of a
awake.
bitch.
Okay.
I sent an email. I really thought we were gonna behave.
I mean, did you want me to interrupt Joe more, or was that not enough? I was trying
No,
to. Like,
you
I'm
know
trying
what?
to. I'm trying to just like mind my own business over here. Okay, John.
All right. Well, let's close it down because you're gonna need to talk.
I'm,
a
no,
little
I'm.
bit,
Listen,
and
we're talking about me. I am in this. Let's do it.
All right. Okay.
I was so excited when I saw your name in there. Like, yes.
If you had read my post, Joe, I said, "Don't tell John."
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Son of a bitch. All right. So here we are, Eric. We're at your list.
Mhm.
You had 14 films
Ooh.
of the final top 25. So there you go. Do you have a sense now for what your highest rated film that didn't make the final list is?
Well, as we just covered, I've been on Slack, so
So no, he's not paying attention.
I'm gonna
have
guess.
four.
I'm gonna guess Climax.
Correct.
Boom.
Climax. Eric's number 5 film. Eric, you and I think there were 3 people who voted out of the 15 for Climax, and you and I both had it, I think, in our top 10.
Really high.
And
yeah.
it
mean,
did not make the final.
It was a weird list for me because I have 3 to possibly 4 movies that I don't know what's going to be my number 1 movie of the year yet. And like that's notwithstanding anything else that might come out. Not that I don't, but like, so when I got to ordering my top 10, I have legit 3 movies in there that I'm not fully decided on yet. But a Climax is like in my top 5 this year, easy. It's just like I went with gut on most of these. Like things that stuck with me, they were really like Attack the Block, fantastic movie. The only thing that stuck with me is it's run in slow motion and its teeth are really bright. Like, but there were other movies that like just got into my core and stayed there. And Climax like is one, and I think will continue to be one.
It was also like 3 months ago. Like,
Well, yeah, I agree. But few movies that over the whole course of the show have like left my jaw that on the floor while watching.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm 100% with you. That movie was fucking like legitimately bananas. Like one of the craziest things we've seen.
Yeah.
And the production and just the way that it flows. It's so unique in a lot of ways too. So, do you want to know what the movie was that's on my list? Actually, it wasn't one of my stats, but that I actually would use the exact same description you used.
Yeah.
I think it might have been unique on my list actually. I put Human Centipede.
Nice.
Had to do it.
Ooh,
I had to do it.
I mean, I'm impressed.
Not
but
part
yeah.
2,
I had
huh?
that
Hmm.
one. No,
Yeah,
it just
okay.
got dropped.
I was gonna say it was not on many, but to me that's like one of those movies when you think about the last 10 years, it's like you're gonna think about that movie at some point.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's just
No,
fucking
it's
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it is and was a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
People that
It
well, we
remains.
discussed at the time, but like all of us had the experience of random normies that you don't want to be talking about like butt to mouth stuff with asking about
But-
this movie.
Wait, hold up. So, would you talk about butt to mouth stuff without random normies?
No, with horror people, sure. That
Like when you're in the like trust tree,
Yeah.
CC.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Trust tree?
Yeah.
Thank you,
You
John.
do butt
Yeah.
to mouth stuff in a tree?
This
I
is a
mean-
no HR zone.
It's not a literal tree, I guess. Is what I'm
Oh,
saying.
okay.
I will never forget that Bloody Good Horror sent me to review that in the theater.
You were like sick. Didn't you say you got like physically ill?
No, I went to the Pony Bar's
He
1 year
drank too much.
anniversary that had open bar and open food, and like pounded there
Yeah.
for like an hour and a half, and then went and saw Human Centipede.
No, and then
like,
I sent the two of you to a press screening of Human Centipede 2, John, and I think like you said it was really hot and you guys were drinking and like did not feel well. Human Centipede
that
2
also-
is like maybe an illegal movie.
wait,
never seen it.
No, we didn't go see that. We
Yeah.
went-
Well, I mean, I
John,
definitely saw
maybe it
in
was just
press screen-
John then. I thought you were with him, Joe, for some
Maybe.
reason.
In any event, the Human Centipede films, those are real treasures of the last decade. Eric, your unique films. You had three
Mhm.
unique films. Number
Unique,
18,
huh?
Paranormal Activity 3.
Oh, dude, so that's the retro one where they're in the 80s, and they had the brilliant scene with the fan, the camera.
Yeah, the
on
camera
the fan.
on the
Yeah.
oscillating
I
fan.
have a lot of
yeah.
found footage on my list, and that like I loved pretty much even the bad Paranormal Activity movies. Like I enjoyed that stretch where like every year there was like one of those movies to go see. You know what I mean? They were like really fun. You
Yeah.
know, to steal a Joe phrase, like butt puckery Halloween horror movies. And I think that one by far was the best. Like I loved the first
Yeah.
two, but the
Right.
third one just blew me away.
I think I used clench. I don't think I used pucker, but
Butt,
you know,
butt clenchy.
that one I struggled with. I it almost made my list.
I mean, there were like some movies I cut that I don't know, I was a little on the edge on, but I figured like my brand, John, is loving found footage, so I felt like I would go to the mat for it in this situation.
Oh yeah, your brand is also trolling. I feel like, which is what you did with some of the other films on your list.
John, these are all genuine loves, all right? I'm not trolling.
Yeah,
you.
well, no, I know. For example, the other two unique films, Prometheus at number 21
Mm.
and It Chapter 2 at number 25.
Listen,
That literally to me was like, it was the most recent movie I ever saw in the theater.
No.
It's like-
It Chapter 2, I can't emotionally go through this again, John. It
I
Chapter
know, I
2
know.
is a beautiful, lovingly crafted horror film. It's incredible, okay? Prometheus, I love Prometheus has problems, but it is like one of the most beautiful sci-fi movies I've ever seen.
Mhm. I
It
mean,
is
I still love Prometheus.
mind bending
Oh.
in ways I really love. It introduced me to my love of
Michael Fassbender.
David.
the Fassbender. Thank you. It then
Yeah.
gave me a sequel in which I was able to see Fassbender make out with himself, which is like a top 10 life moment for me. Okay, so
Alien Covenant. I get them confused. That's like one of my problems. Is like I'm not sure what happens in Prometheus versus.
I really
Alien
like
so-
Covenant too. But
Yeah.
if I had to pick one, I went with Prometheus.
Yeah.
Which one had Danny McBride?
First one.
That's Prometheus. I
That's
think.
Prometheus. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like
Fun
the.
fact: Eric still very active on Slack right now.
God.
I have ADD, Joe. Right? I'm just trying to keep it on the rails.
Eric, do you have another film that didn't make your list that
Yeah,
that you would put your flag on?
I'm
This is
gonna-
an Eric film.
I'm gonna cheat, John. I have two.
Oh, that's all right. I'll give you two. You know
And-
what? You host the show most days. You do a lot of the legwork. We'll let you.
Staying on brand, both found footage. Number one, this was on my list until the last minute when someone had pointed something out to me that I was like, oh crap, I don't even remember what it was, but I was like, I got to get this on the list. So I bumped The Bay,
Oh
which is
yeah,
a
you did have the Bay on
2015
there. I
Hey.
noticed.
2015
What
found footage movie in which a reporter gets basically trapped in this town that's being inundated with these like they're like mutated crab monstery things or something, like parasite type situation. It's really good. I love when movies actually nail fake TV stuff. It's just like
Mhm.
kind of an inside baseball thing I enjoy. That movie kills it. The lead actress is fantastic. It's like really intense. So it was at my 25 until like last minute that got bumped.
I don't even remember that being a thing.
I don't know if we did it on
It's,
the show. I think I might have just watched it on my own, honestly. I think it,
No, I'm pretty sure
No,
there's
we
an
covered it.
episode. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
a famous director.
Barry Levinson.
Yeah, Barry Levinson. Yeah.
yeah, I highly
Uh-huh.
recommend it if you're into found footage. The other one, found footage, and so amidst the let's call it Listgate 2019, where last minute people are trying to add stuff to the list, I had requested because I really started thinking about it, and I fell in love with this movie last year called Hell House LLC. It's been talked
Ooh.
about a lot lately because they just released a new sequel. Don't watch the sequels, just don't do it yourself. But the first one is like one of the scariest found footage movies I've ever seen. Inevitably, people are going to go see it now and tell me I overhyped it. I don't care. Don't at me. But it's really good. I've watched it. So I saw this for the first time last year on Halloween time. I watched it like 6 times in the last year. And so when I really started thinking about it, I was like, God, maybe I should be like considering this for my list. And But I don't know, at the end of the day, to John's point, like I knew nobody else was gonna have it on there, so I figured I wouldn't mess with it.
No, I don't think you're wrong. We just watched it like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
like Leslie, my sister-in-law, and I are still talking about it. It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely great. And there's that movie. I give that one credit too because they do some stuff that's completely telegraphed, and just the way it's shot still scares me.
You know,
I'm fairly desensitized to that
The
crap.
best found footage only needs to be simple. Like it's all about framing and pacing and camera work, right? It's why like I was annoyed by the Blair Witch remake because it's just gimmicky. It's like there's a drone and like it's like you don't need that to be scary. It's okay, Joe.
Yeah.
I'm just saying
Are
like
you?
No,
Are you
no,
coming
I
at
like
me?
my found
Are you
footage like
coming at
I
me?
like my found footage like simple and pure, and that's why Hell House LLC I think is so good, which is incredible
was-
because the sequels appear to be made by a person who doesn't understand movies at all, actually. So I'm there's another mystery.
Not only have they never seen Hell House LLC 1,
They've never-
they've never seen any other movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of mind bending how bad the sequels are, but I recommend that. one.
Don't let Eric talk you out of the Blair Witch movie. It top 25 material.
There you go. All right, guys, we've made it to the top 5. Are we
Beautiful.
ready?
No.
Anything else? Anything else we want to get in here? Eric, I did I am doing right now the count of Blumhouse. It's actually lower than you might think. I've got it at 1, 2, 3.
I think
is
you're
your
next.
next?
I
I
think
don't
you-
think you're
I'm
next.
pretty sure it is.
Mm-mm.
No,
I don't
Say
think so.
again. Which one?
That
Eric?
was like an Adam Wingard flick, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got it at 6 of the 25.
okay.
So, all right, the number 5 film, It Follows, 2015.
Mm.
It Follows.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, Green Room.
So good.
Yep.
I missed that on my
Mhm.
list that year because we didn't get to a show on it, and then I watched it like early winter the next year, and I was like, just
Yeah.
mind blown when I saw that movie.
Yeah, no, I'm in the same boat. I think I saw it like we didn't cover it. I don't think there's an episode on it actually.
No, that's what I'm
Um,
saying. It's the only time in the last decade where we missed a movie, and I saw it, and I was like, this would have been my number 1.
Yeah, it is crazy to think that actually of all of the movies on the top 25, we have an episode. I'm almost positive, except the number 4 film. Number 3, here it is, guys. Cabin in the Woods.
Oh,
Yeah, I had it up on mine. I mean,
that was
Well-
my prediction for number 1.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there had been a lot of Slack chatter, and I think a lot of people were interested sort of where it was going to land. I similarly thought it could be at number 1. To give you a sense, really quick, Cabin in the Woods. I think it ends up. So basically, the top 3 and 4 films. So basically, I mentioned only one film is on all the ballots. It's number 1. So Cabin in the Woods was only on 13 of 15 ballots. So that's sort of the difference there. Number 2, this was on 14 ballots. The Witch.
Yes.
baby butter.
Witch. This is my number 1.
Oh, look at
Nonetheless.
you.
You
Yeah.
would.
And my number 2.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get to it. I have everyone's number 1 here. So, Cece, in fact, you were the only one of this group to pick the number 1 film. That's Get Out.
Oh,
Yeah.
so smart here.
Get Out was on every single list. It was in most people's top 5s. It was in, I think, everybody's top 10.
Wait, so Get Out is number 1? You did that so anticlimactic.
Yeah,
mean,
it is number 1, Joe.
You'd
I'm
ask for
sorry.
a drum roll?
Yeah, like I don't. You could have been like,
All right. Sorry, let's do it again. Be quiet. Everyone be quiet.
No.
3
literally
seconds.
just like,
Get
oh, and
Out.
CC had number 1. It was Get Out. So anyway, next week we're talking about.
Yeah, Get Out, number 1. So the top 5. It Follows at number 5. Green Room at number 4. Cabin in the Woods at number 3. The Witch at number 2. Get Out was number 1, Joe.
That's
Thank you.
really interesting because I think Us is like much better than Get Out.
Oh.
Maybe not
So-
much, but I would put them like in. I think I had them in reverse order. I mean, they're both like great movies. It's not a big deal. But
It's yeah,
interesting.
right. I mean, look, it's interesting. You have 2 different directors with 2 films
Yeah.
in the top 10.
I mean, the clear winners of this list are these 2 dudes.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. they've got to be honored. I assume they're watching the live.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
obviously. Listen, and The Lighthouse is out this week. The Witch, number 2 on our list. We'll see. Lighthouse could be late, sneak it in there for the decade. So yeah, I mentioned my number 1 was The Witch. Casey, we talked about your number 1. Let Me In. CC, Get Out. Joe, do you remember what you had?
I just looked, so yeah, I do.
It was Midsummer.
Yeah, it sure was.
think you were the only one that had it number 1, but again, number 7 on the whole list. So
You know what I
you're-
love about that? Like Midsummer, not at all a movie I would expect Joe's number 1 to be, and I love that.
It's a little metal. It's a little metal, I would say.
It's
yeah,
100%.
okay, I see that. It's so artsy, though, Joe.
I don't know, like that movie. I think because I didn't expect to. Well, no, I expected to like it because I really get into cults. Like I like that whole kind of creepy vibe. But I think like the time, like the 2-hour duration, really kind of concerned me. But it just like blew me away. Like I didn't want it to end. It's the first Blu-ray I've bought in probably like 5 years, outside of like Star Wars movies, because you gotta those.
Which you buy like once a year, basically. Just like,
Wow.
they threw some new stuff on this Blu-ray. So.
They do, and I have to own it.
That's fair. That's fair. Eric, you're number 1. It Follows.
Yeah. I mean, I stared at this top 5 and I was like, it's any one of these. But like It Follows to me ended up being like a little bit of a personal pick because I spent a lot of the 2000s feeling like
You were running away from a sexually transmitted disease?
yes, question mark. How did you know? No, like I think that for a long time, filmmakers got away from the really simple things that made horror films in the 80s so memorable. A huge one is like memorable scores with distinct themes that you can then pick out when you hear them later, right? Like filmmakers got in this rut of just using this really rote orchestral score BS that you would never remember in a million years, right? Like simple stalk and slasher type stuff. Atmosphere and mood, stuff that makes the original Halloween really amazing, even though there's not a lot to it. And It Follows, to me, like heralded in this resurgence of these kind of like horror filmmaking values. It introduced me to Disaster Piece, which is now like one of my favorite bands. I was just like on such a high when I got out of that movie, just being like, finally somebody understands. Like, it almost felt like somebody reviving like a lost art in a way. You know what I mean? Like somebody was finally looking back to the past and learning from it instead of running away from it. And I think that a lot of the things that make It Follow so good have informed genre movies in the years since then for the better. And so that was kind of why it was like a little bit of a sentimental pick for me.
It's a good movie, and a lot of people had it. So we can do it really quick. I want to kind of give everyone who voted and spent a lot of time making their top 25 list a little hat tip. So, Eric, you had It Follows at number 1, and the only other person who did was Sophie.
Oh, her and I are like this, so I get that.
There you go. I mentioned CC had Get Out. Get Out had the most number 1 votes. CC, Mark, Andy were the 3 who had Get Out at number 1. I had The Witch, and so did Luke and Jason, my kindred spirits.
Nice.
Shout out to those guys. Cabin in the Woods was Evan's number 1. No one. So Green Room at number 4 had no number 1 votes. That it was the highest with no number 1 votes. Adam, our buddy, had Hereditary, as did Valeska.
Nice.
Us was Shelton's number 1. I'm sorry, I'm like having to scroll through a lot of numbers. Joe had Midsummer, as we have discussed. And then we get into, we talked about Casey with Let Me In. And I believe the last one is Andrew, who actually had The Invitation as his number 1 film.
Nice. That's a banger.
There you go. So huge shout out to everyone who voted. Look, like, we have to set rules around these things. I know there's a lot of pissing and moaning. Maybe when I send out the ballot next time, tell me if there's a movie you want to see on there. But I really do appreciate it. I kind of said up top, I feel really good about where this list landed. And it's always one of those things where it's like, it's kind of a futile effort to sort of like rate pieces of art against each other. But I think it's also helpful to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, we as a group, like, this is the sort of collective I don't know, preference or feeling that we have. And there's some really, really good films. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really struck at the strength of not only this list, but the top 50 that you might have ended up with, right? And like we talked about this a lot in the show, but I think this going through this process, making this list has just really cemented. There's no doubt in my mind, especially after looking at this is the best time to be a horror fan, right? It's like there's more stuff available than ever, and you've got people working at every end of the spectrum. That you've got on one end people making these really intense politically charged things. You've got people like Ari Aster exploring the like depths of human emotion in ways that the genre has never reached, like heights that's never reached. You've got people making goofy movies about 80s metal to keep Joe happy, right? You've got like horror comedies and slasher. Like there is such a wide array of things, and people taking things that worked in the past and taking them in new directions, right? Or pushing deeper and getting deeper to the core of why we love the genre. I can't imagine what the next decade is going to bring, especially people who are now growing up and being influenced by people like imagine what people are going to make that are growing up on Ari Aster and Jordan Peele films. Like, can you imagine the kind of shit those people are going to, you know what I mean?
Well,
like how it's going to get concentrated and turned around and to be even more potent. It's just like, I can't wait to see where this stuff goes.
And the fact that we have the distribution channels for really unique voices, so we touched on it a little bit, but you have films like Creep, Cam, Revenge that essentially were direct to streaming. And we've talked about it a ton, but in previous generations, just like never would have seen the light of day, or if they did, it was on a VHS that got passed around, or you had to, you like saw it just randomly at your store, or probably like some creepy, clerk recommended it to you. God bless. I was one of those people, so God bless. But I mean, so totally. And you're right. Like I look at something like Shudder. It's amazing that we have that in our lives. I honestly feel that. And I don't even use it that frequently, but I know that it's there, and I know that there's like random cool shit that's just getting like thrown on there all the time, which I love. So
nice.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about the patrons? Because
of course,
a lot of them submitted top 10.
No,
I'm actually really excited about
I love that. I love we got their participation. It's great.
So we had 37 ballots submitted. This was open to all patrons. We posted it. Look, it took a little work. Yeah, it was not the perfect execution. I am definitely going to do it differently next time. But I'm really excited. And what's interesting, so let me give you the headline numbers. So I said 37 ballots submitted. So we had 100 films out of our 15 ballots and 25 votes. They had 37 ballots, 10 votes. 102 films were on at least one list.
That's wild.
Yeah, so really crazy. There were 2 films that were on 25 ballots. That was the most that any movie was on any ballot. So there's actually more diversity across these lists, which I love. There was only one film in the BGH list that didn't get a single vote from a single patron. And this kind of surprised me, but it was Revenge, which was our 12th film.
Interesting.
Was not on a single ballot. There were a couple of moments. So I should say I did not collect anyone's name, so I have no ability to bust anyone's balls by name. But there were 3 individual ballots. Say it again.
Big mistake, John.
I know. Again, we're gonna do some things differently next time. There was not a single top 10 ballot that was submitted that had all their 10 on our 25 list. So there was not a single one. There were 3 ballots that had 9 show up on the top 25. And there was one ballot, one glorious ballot that only had 1 of their votes on our top 25.
And you can't tell me who that was.
No, I can't, but
Damn it,
God
John.
bless them. I really,
So what are the crazy picks on that ballot? Do you have it?
I can pull it up. It was very indie. It was a very indie vote. Let me just tell you.
This already sounds obnoxious.
Stop. Come on, Joe. Hold on. It's gonna take me
number 1, Gummo.
Oh man.
No, that was like 2004.
That movie's real old.
I wrote my final paper in video editing on that movie.
All right, here
God.
you go. You ready?
That's
I'm
amazing.
gonna read it down for you. So number 10, they had Under the Skin. Number 9, Tucker, or sorry, I'm reading them in reverse order. Number 10 for them was I Am Not a Serial Killer. Number 9, I Saw the Devil. 8 was It Follows. That's their one. Sightseers, The Blackcoat's Daughter,
Okay.
The Endless, The Ritual. Joe, shout out.
All right. Yeah, this list isn't nearly as annoying as I thought it was going to be.
No, look, well, this is again, it's an example of like how deep the pool is. So now we're in the top 3. The Void, shout out Casey.
Yay.
Number 2, Tucker and Dale. Number 1, Under the Skin.
Huh.
Nice. That
Which was Under the Skin?
Under the
Was that
Skin
the
is,
Scojo?
Scarjo.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with any of those.
That movie's-
I'm pretty
that
sure I know
movie's-
who it is based on the Tucker and Dale pick.
No,
Oh.
Tucker and Dale got a lot of patron votes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it does not make the top 10, but it was sort of in the ballot. I wanted to mention only one ballot listed both Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You. So
Nice.
you know who you are out there. And no one listed. There was no one in any of the voting that listed both It films. Eric came the closest with It
What,
Chapter 2.
Because you can't listen. It's 25 movies. You can't put both of them. You
Yeah.
got to pick your favorite.
How many lists mention that Terrifier movie that Jamie on Slack goes nuts for? Because if there's only one, we know.
It was on mine.
No,
It was
at
on my
least.
list.
It was a couple. Yeah, I think Eric did sneak it in at the end.
Well, how many have it at number 1? Let me ask you that.
That's it. I did not know of that. So, so I mentioned at the top we had 30 different movies in the BGH vote that had only one ballot. There were actually 41 different movies, and including 2 people who had movies at number 1 that were not on any other ballots.
No,
So-
what were those 2?
Those movies were Tigers Are Not Afraid and Mandy.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
I got
Yeah.
that.
So, just a crazy 10 years there.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
I wish I could mock them more, but like those picks aren't
But
terrible.
that's the thing about the movies that we're picking from. It's like, it's just all about
Yeah.
your personality, right? And that's what's
Well,
cool about it.
exactly.
Like, they're all great. It's amazing. Amazing
All of
movies.
them except Terrifier are great films. No, I'm,
Get them.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
Agreed, John. Agreed.
Actually, I just checked. It's not on my list. I'm remembering now that we had a fight about putting it on or something. because I don't see it on your.
Well,
Oh,
it was
unless
on
it's- is it
the.
The
I
Terrifier?
did a separate ballot for the public vote, and then I did allow it to be added to people's
So I think
ballots.
it might have made it on mine, but whatever.
Wow.
It's fine.
Here we are. Okay, so the honorable. So we're only going to count down 10. The honorable mentions, The Invitation, Creep.
You want to finish what you got going there, buddy? Before you...
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, we've been going a while here. Just hang tight. The Invitation, Creep, and Evil Dead were the honorable mentions. So
Nice.
in the top 10,
The people who love Evil Dead, and they will
Mm.
tell you about it, John. That's what I've learned from this experience.
well, it was our number 22 film for the BGH
Yeah,
crew.
it was our number 1 pick, and it didn't make their top 10.
It was fine.
Well, no, but I'm saying it was our number 22,
Yeah.
the main list. All right, here you go. Number 10, Insidious.
That was
Coming
my
out of-
that was my
Not list,
one
though, but-
that was my one
I-
Blumhouse, my one Blumhouse or my one I Wantiverse shout out rather.
I take back all those nice things I just said about them.
To me it was the one that started it. So as sick of the whole thing as I am, like that was a really that movie changed the genre. Like
Was that
quite
the Darth
literally.
Maul one?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
All right. So
It was on, Eric, you were not the only one. Of the 15 BGH folks, it was on 3 BGH
I mean,
ballots.
that movie quite literally changed the course of the genre for the entire decade, John. It came out at
But
the beginning and it changed the
Yeah.
like how many movies have we seen?
but for the better? I don't know.
well, I'm not saying it's not quantitative. I'm just saying.
I can pull this up. I like have the numbers. But did it predate Conjuring? That's what I
Yeah,
couldn't
think
remember.
It did.
Okay, it was like the year before. All right, well, here you go. Insidious.
It
number
was
9.
the first. Yeah, it was the first one.
Okay. Number 9, Annihilation. Number 8, Midsummer.
Mhm.
Number 7, The Conjuring. Thank you, patrons,
So
for validating me and Joe. Sort of.
we should mention that
and
there was
everything.
like a little bit of a coup that seemed to be forming with some of them, where they just weren't considering a lot of the sci-fi things because Annihilation not being in the list is friggin' bonkers.
It's number 9. It's not that it's not on the list. It's number 9.
Oh, okay. I thought we were doing. Sorry, I thought we were doing honorable
No.
mentions again.
it's
Josh is
actually.
listing
I-
movies now.
Is he on Slack, Joe? Is he on Slack right now?
I
You
w-
tell me.
I was, yeah.
You tell me.
No, I'm actually texting Sophie right now about how we're number 1 buddies.
Oh, Eric. So it's funny because Annihilation is our number 9, and it's the patron number 9. So here we are. Midsommar number 8, The Conjuring number 7, The Witch number 6,
The Witch.
number 5, What We Do in the Shadows. Number 4, moving up here, It Follows, up from our number 5 to their number 4. Number 3, Hereditary.
Nice.
That's right. We're gonna have we got a little shake up here in the top 5. Number 2, Get Out. Number 1 for the patrons, Cabin in the Woods.
Nice.
You did it.
Yeah.
Did it, patrons.
You were
You got
almost
it.
right, Joe.
Yeah.
Cabin in the Woods was a funny year because I remember that year-end show distinctly because it was one of the years where like nothing came close to that one on the ballots, and then when we were filling out our top 10, we all kind of like had some trouble.
Well, I think it's the only time we've ever had a unanimous. If it wasn't unanimous, it was very, very close. That was on every list. So yeah, the patron top 10 list actually had 8 of our top 10 films on there. So a lot of crossover. But the 2 that they added did not even make our top 25, which I thought was kind of interesting. So there you go. Many thanks to the patrons. I'm sorry, not all of your favorite films made the ballot. You know.
Try
You all were
harder
very
next
adult
time,
about
you know?
it. Yeah.
I'm
So
not sorry.
Well,
Great.
good guys. This has been great. This has been a great
Yeah.
decade. Should we tell everyone that this is the last show? Like we're
So anyway, we have some news.
it might be my last show. No. we're-
John, how do you feel, buddy? How do you feel about your first list show of 2019?
I'm actually very excited now to do the year-end list.
Nice.
So.
Are we going to do some patron stuff for the year-end list as well?
Oh yeah. We're gonna run it back. I got a whole like process revamp I'm gonna run out, and I feel
Beautiful.
really good about it.
Beautiful.
yeah. As much as I like to mock you, John, like you knocked it out of the park here. Not stats, but also with keeping this moving because I thought this episode was going to be 9 hours.
Yes, agreed.
That was only
I
90
told
minutes.
you. Yeah, I
We got
had
going
I had a
too.
script. We were ready to go. You know.
Yeah,
so.
but I know you had plans, but keeping baby Huey there centered below you.
Oh Lord.
John, are we
yeah,
going to post
so
this on the website?
We are going to post on the website. My hope was to have it up tomorrow for Halloween. Hopefully, this podcast will serve as our official sort of Halloween announcement. I'll get it up soon. It'll be up. It'll be up for the end of the year for sure.
Love it. All right, guys. That's going to do it for Bloody Good Horror's top 25 horror movies of the decade. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you happen to have wandered in to the live stream and you've never seen a live stream before, you're interested, you want to check us out, we're in iTunes, we're on Spotify. You can also, if you like what you hear, go to patreon.com/bloodygoodhorror, support the show, check out back episodes, and get this weekly live stream as a part of that. So everybody who joined us tonight, thank you. Everybody who's listening in their car, road raging on the way to work, we thank you as well. We got more movies in 2019 to watch, so hopefully nothing's too good, John. We're gonna have to blow this whole show up and do it again.
Yeah, well,
No, we're
I
not
think
gonna
we'll
do
be
that.
okay.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's gonna do it. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
See you.
Bye.
All right, bye everybody.
Cece, you're on the show every week.
Ugh.